Good afternoon and good evening from wherever you're watching. Thank you for joining us for our inaugural session in 2022, Chai and Just Chat. I have my chai ready. Do you have yours? And of course, please, water is always healthy, so have that as well. Today's discussion is very important. We all know about it. We sometimes rarely speak about it because we accept as it is everyday session. But then today's topic is about mother tongue and the importance of mother tongue. The Chai and Just Chat sessions are also sponsored by Vendorship Inc. So I would like to thank Vendorship and the team for doing what they do. And as we know, International Mother's Day language is on Feb 22nd. UNESCO has created a day just for discussion of like topics like this, but we just chose an earlier month to speak about it. We will have panelists join in as we move forward, but I'm so happy to be joined by these experts this morning. I'm going to very quickly introduce each one of them very briefly, but I would like for them to say more about themselves. For example, I'll also go through the agenda. I'll ask you general questions, panelists. There are questions that attendees have asked when they registered, and we'll continue to discuss, and then we'll go deep dive down into language and culture and discuss other things as well. And if you are not speaking and if there's any background, please do mute yourself, or I can also mute you depending. So I would like to introduce Ashok Uncle Ji, and it's very hard for me to call him just by his first name. He's also a father of a very good friend of mine, Hina Bhatt, who is also an Ayurvedic physician. So Ashok Uncle Ji, you are a retired assistant commissioner from Bombay Municipal Corporation, right, and also you're an astrologer. Can you tell us more about yourself, please?
Yes. No, I am running 79 years of age. I am lucky to join this seminar, and I am more happy because 21st February is my birthday. So I'll be entering 80 years of age.
And that day is the International Mother Language Day. Wow.
It's International Mother Language Day. Good.
Very nice.
Besides this, I was born in Gujarat, but then after 6-7 years of age, when normally a child is admitted for school education, my auntie brought me to Bombay. And I was in Bombay for more than 60 years. And since last 20 years, I am in USA with my children, my son and my daughter. So far my education is concerned, in my childhood I have studied Sanskrit, thereafter the mother tongue Gujarati, and then Hindi, Marathi, because I was in Maharashtra, Bombay, India. So Marathi was somewhat compulsory as a second language. So I knew and I have understood and fluently talk in 5 languages. That is Sanskrit, Gujarati, mother tongue. Second, the national language Hindi. Third, Marathi. And finally, English in college level.
Very
so I did my BA graduation, then BCom graduation in commerce, and then LLB graduation in law. That too in Bombay only. And then I got married at 27, and by the age 30, God has blessed me to have a son, and at the age of 34, God has blessed me to have a daughter, that is Hina.
Very nice.
The thing is, the moment I completed 18 years of age, because of the economic conditions, I was forced to join job. So I did earning, learning together, because there was such a situation where if I do not get job, then I cannot maintain expenses for my education. So education in Bombay is also was even in those days very costly.
Definitely.
By the grace of God and by my sincere endeavor, my efforts, I could complete master graduations at the age of 26.
Very well said.
I hope, so for the job is concerned, I was working, I first joined as a accountant clerk in the Bombay Municipal Corporation. But then after passing LLB, administration decided to use my services for legal department, that is law. So I had experience to work in small causes court, thereafter in city civil court, and finally in the high court. But that was a period for at least 3 years. But meantime, I decided to have some promotion. So I appeared for the Maharashtra, that is called MPSC, Maharashtra Pradesh. As you have UPSC, we have MPSC. Those tests are very important for channel promotion.
Got it.
Fortunately, I got promotion at the age of 33 and I became class 1 officer. And
Great.
once you become class 1 officer, they rotate us in different units. So I had an occasion to work in accounts, that is finance and budget. Thereafter, I was also transferred to work in engineering, which is connected with all water supply system of Bombay Municipal Corporation. Then after 6 years, because after 5 to 6 years, it was compulsory to have a change in cadre, change in service, and change in atmosphere. So I got work in health management.
Very
So I was
nice.
in charge of 4 major hospitals of Bombay, that is KM Hospital, Nair, Sion Hospital, and there were at the same time some 17 to 18 peripheral hospitals. So I was in health management and hospital management. So I
Very
was
nice.
lucky to get some background about medical field.
Very nice, awesome. So looks like you've got a very wonderful, beautiful journey, and you're transferring some of that wisdom to your children as well, and to us. And we look forward to listening more about what your thoughts are on mother tongue and languages. So you're already speaking 5 languages. That you're a multilingualist, and
Yes.
that's great. So I would like to go to Senator Michelle Au next. And Senator Michelle Au is also Dr. Michelle Au. She's a physician mom. She's a proud Chinese American and is representing the Georgia Senate District 48 and is also running for Senate District 50. So, Senator Michelle Au, please tell us more about yourself.
Thank you, Nazeera, and thank you so much for including me in this really interesting conversation today. So, I'm Dr. Michelle Au. I'm an anesthesiologist in Metro Atlanta, and I also serve as the state senator for Georgia's 48th district, which encompasses North Fulton and Gwinnett counties. I am a second generation Chinese American. My parents immigrated here in the 1960s from Hong Kong, and I grew up speaking Cantonese. I'm also the first Asian woman ever in the Georgia State Senate. So, this is a really interesting topic for me because, as a second generation Chinese American, Asian American, we often deal with these issues of how do we blend our, native culture, our parents' culture with the increasing Americanization of being born in this country, and how do we blend the languages that we speak at home? How do we teach our kids? I am really looking forward to this conversation and looking forward to meeting everyone here.
Thank you, Michelle, so much. Next, I'd like to go to Salil. Mr. Salil Gulbe is also an Atlanta resident. I've known with him or worked on a couple of projects when we were addressing decreasing crime rate in the Asian American, burglaries in the Asian American community. So, Salilji, if you can please introduce yourself. You're also a businessman and a community advocate, please.
Thank you, Nazeera, and really nice to meet you, everybody, virtually. I also have a similar background like Mr. Bhatt. I did my BCom in Mumbai. I was born and brought up in Mumbai. I did my BCom, then I did my LLB, then I did my company secretary, then I also did my MCom, and I was doing a lot of things. I was involved with Rotary, Rotrac. That time I was a charter founder president for Rotrac Club of Bombay North. And I was very active. I was also the general secretary of Students' Council for Podar College. And I had done a lot of different things over there. My younger brother passed away at 23. I was barely 26. And I was very depressed. So then my mother suggested that I go to US. So I came here back in the mid 80s. I did my MBA. Then in California, and of course that time we did not have internet, in the sense there was absolutely no internet, no GPS, nothing, and I had to learn and figure out everything how to do myself. And then I came to Connecticut, did my another master's over there. I was a professor City. Then I also taught at University of Maryland. I also Governor Paris Glendening that time had a prison program, so I taught at the prison also at Hagerstown, maximum security prison. And then I did a lot of research, publications, those kind of things. And then I was in a PhD program. I was trying to complete that, and my twins were born, and they were almost 4 weeks premature, 6 weeks premature, and they were in incubator, and one of them needed emergency surgery. My wife was also in hospital, and I had to juggle everything. And as a professor, faculty member, or teaching in the teaching field, we do not come under the purview of Family Leave Act. So I cannot take time off. Still have to teach, because we were teaching 4 or 5 courses, and I still have to teach. I still have to juggle everything, and did so. I had to only thing I could do was put my PhD on hold. And basically, after 6 months, they said, okay, since you are not going to be able to finish within 5 years, we will have to convert you to contractual position. And what that means is there is no health insurance. So that was a big consideration for me. So I moved to Atlanta, and then I started working here, and then I started my own company, took it to almost 300 employees. I did a lot of different things. And, going on, I did a lot of community service. I uh, and I did a lot of different things, and I appreciate all the opportunities life has given me to do work and help anybody possible. Thank you.
Sounds good. So Salilji, looks like you do speak Marathi. That must be your mother tongue.
Yes, my mother tongue is Marathi, but since I was born and brought up in Bombay, I learned Marathi, Hindi, and English pretty much at the same time.
Okay.
And we would kind of mix everything. And then when I went to school, I learned Gujarati. મને ગુજરાતી બહુ સારી રીતે વાત કરતા આવડે છે.
Okay.
So I learned Gujarati. I had the Sindhi neighbors, so I learned some Sindhi and Punjabi. मैनू पंजाबी भी आंदी है. So, and then you learn to pronounce it the right way. Also, I learned some Tamil in college. Vanakkam.
Oh.
So I did a lot of different things, and it was fun. I really enjoyed. And then in school I took French and German.
Wow.
So 1 year of French, 1 year of German, and 2 years of Sanskrit.
Wow.
So I kind of got some background in that also.
Very nice. Very
Thank
proud of you. Manik Rajendran is our next panelist. He's the founder of IMI Healthcare, but beyond that, he does a lot of other things as well. Manik, please, if you can introduce yourself further.
Thank you, Nazeera. Good morning to everyone, and very nice to be among multilingual panelists. I think I'm in a minority. I don't know more than 2 languages, but others seem to have a lot more languages. But this is a very important topic, so thank you for inviting me. I have been in the United States for about 33 years, and I started out as a mechanical engineer. Then I did my management from one of the top institutes in India, transformed myself into an operations research computer guy, and then somewhere along the way I managed to get into finance and Wall Street. I was a VP at Deutsche Bank, at about which time I had invested in a healthcare company, EMR company, that fortuitously got me a good exit. Then I was able to buy a few medical billing companies and sold those companies as well. So at about 10 years ago, I had the good fortune to be in a good place, and my kids offered me a great offer. They said, Dad, we know you want to do something in India when you're retired, but that's the wrong time to go to India, because no one might listen to you, or you might not have the energy. You're young. Why don't you take a 5-year sabbatical from family and go do what you want to do in India? So I grabbed it. I mean, who else would get a sabbatical from family? And I grabbed it. I went to India 5 years. It extended to 10 years. the last 4 years of which my wife joined me. She said, "You're having way too much fun all by yourself there. I'm coming too." So we put up the home in New Jersey for sale. So we went to India, stayed there the last 4 years. Now I'm back to the United States to be close to my family. My sons are here in Atlanta, so I'm here, and I'm very much in the healthcare industry. I'm currently working with a good model called office-based laboratories, which are a step down from ambulatory surgical centers, which are themselves a step down from hospitals.
Very
So
nice.
the senator would know the ASCs and OBLs, and it's a great time at this point. Even though the pandemic has crippled the entire world economy, it has opened up a whole bunch of innovativeness and creativeness. So we have fast forward a number of technologies today. In fact, every one of our families will have at least 6 medical devices at home, starting from the measly thermometer to a pulse oximeter. Who ever heard of a pulse oximeter prior to 2 years ago? But it's a very important aspect. So we are in exciting times, and I'm so happy to be part of this panel, especially something, it sounds offbeat, but it's not quite offbeat. It is actually very relevant to where we are, the language, the culture, and how do we go about to having a universal culture, a universal civilization. We've been small civilizations all over the world, throughout centuries. Now we are all amalgamating. I mean, all of us need a common language at this point, the 5 of us, and we don't speak our own mother tongue in this panel, and that is a great showcase of how we are all coming together.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Manik. United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization rightly said, right, that language is more than a means of communication. It is the very condition of our humanity, right? Our beliefs, our values, and identity are embedded in it. But before that, I wanted us to discuss what is mother tongue or what is mother language. Saliji, do you want to quickly talk about? And I'm not looking for technical answers or expertise, but just as a common man, what does it mean to a common man? What is mother tongue or mother language?
So basically, when a child is born, the child, every human being, we want to, whether we are just born or whatever, we like to communicate. We are social animals. And the kid starts communicating with the mother. That's the first one. And first, it may be, whatever, those kind of things. But the mother speaks in the words and language, and the kid quickly picks that up. And basically, that's how the kid starts learning the mother tongue, and that's the very first language that they learn and they get used to, and it's part of their family, so that becomes the mother tongue.
Very nice. So, Michelle, I have a quick question for you. So does father get left out in mother tongue?
Well, I think mother tongue is just one of those like colloquialisms. It doesn't necessarily have a gender basis to it. But I think that's right, that it basically refers to the first language that you learn as a child. And I think that as a parent and as a child of immigrants, that choice of what language you speak at home to your baby when they're born is a deliberate choice, and it's sort of like the part of deciding what kind of culture you want to instill in your child. How do you want them to grow up? What is the milieu that you want them to grow? And I say this as someone who was born in the United States. I was born in New York. My parents were immigrants, as I said, and they made a very deliberate choice when I was growing up that they only wanted me to speak Chinese at home. And the reason they told me this was because, we're in America, you're going to learn English, right? But this is how you're going to learn Chinese. So when I was growing up, I actually did not speak any English until I started school. And that was a choice, right? And I think that was a correct choice because it's actually much easier to learn a language as an infant and as a toddler and as a child than it is to pick it up later on. So I think that was an incredible gift that my parents were able to give me. But I do also remember that when I did start school, and I started school pretty early, I started in nursery school, going to school and feeling completely alienated because I didn't know what anyone was saying, right? Because I didn't speak English. And that's that's an experience I still remember. Obviously I learned English pretty quickly because I was only 2, but that choice that we make comes with costs also, right? So I'd love to hear more about what people think about those choices we make for our kids.
Definitely. And Senator, adding on to what you just said, there are several benefits of learning a native language, which I'm also mentioning as mother tongue. So when we are going to use interchangeably during this discussion, native language and mother tongue is almost the same. So let's talk about intellectual development. From what I've been reading, research has again and again shown that any child who is well versed with their native language or the language that they speak at home initially are have a very well developed intellectual development, right? So there's good cognitive development as well. Their thoughts and feelings are shaped much better. So do you want to, you mentioned about it in a personal experience. Do you want to just maybe talk about like is the intellectual improvement, or is that true, or is that just research and it's not always possible? Because I don't know if we have the energy like how our parents had to teach the mother tongue to our children at this time, because priorities change each generation.
Right. And I think about that a lot because I married someone who is not Chinese. So we, it wasn't even so much of a choice. I didn't feel that we were able to give that gift to my children. So it's one of those things that you have some regrets about. But in terms of learning a native language early, we know that in terms of developmental psychology, there is a window of time that human children are best able to pick up a new language, that they're most receptive to new language. And there have been studies done for children who, via various mechanisms, have been unable to learn a language in that time. And it's actually very much harder for them to pick up a language once you get past this developmental window, which we're all aware that kids start babbling and when they're like 8, 9, 10 months old and start speaking their first words at age 2. This is pretty standard in terms of developmental psychology, and that ability to give your children that exposure to a language, especially one that is maybe more difficult for English speakers to pick up, is really an invaluable gift because of the plasticity and ability for younger kids to pick up languages. I'll just point out, and I'm sure that there's commonalities in terms of all sorts of different languages. The Chinese in specific, I speak Cantonese, which is the dialect of Chinese that my parents grew up speaking, is a tonal language. So, when you hear people speak Chinese, it's very like, na, 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 na. And that's difficult for English speakers to pick up. When people go to college and want to learn Chinese or whatever, that's the most difficult part, is that tonality, because it's not something that we're used to, right? So taking advantage of this plasticity for children, teaching them early, gives them something that's really hard to replicate later on in their lives.
Definitely. Thank you, Michelle. So, Ashokji, Uncle Ji, I have the next question for you. Is now again, this is not subject I'm expertise in, but what I've been reading and researching myself is I'm hearing more and more and reading about that if you are well versed with your mother tongue, the
Yes,
second language, third language comes easy. Can you talk about that?
but I will share some views about my personal mother and mother tongue.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I lost my mother in the year 1944 when I was hardly 18 months old. So I was at native place. But normally we say there is no substitute to mother. As we were also taught, there is no substitute to mother moon in the sky at night. So mother and the mother moon have affections, and therefore we say in the universe, moon's importance is very much as it is for every child. Since every child, the mother represents purity of love, affections, and sensitivity with simplicity. The child needs love affection from mother with complete attachment for his nourishment, gradual growth, and development, physical, mental, and social. So for every mother, his child is like an angel of God. So she happily sings lovely songs, poems, tells short stories on her own mother tongue. So normally, the mother's tongue becomes the speech therapy for a child, and therefore the child considers a complete guarantee that the language that his mother speaks is the first language in course of time. So language is first, the culture comes thereafter. In
Very
this
well said.
connection, I will tell you that one great John Davy, a great scholar and lover of linguistic education, said, education in mother tongue is not preparation for life, but education in mother tongue is life itself. So mother is a role model and child's heart. So she's an inspiration, an ally, and an amazing woman. Hence, mother becomes the best friend for child's life journey, as most of the words of the mother tongue are picked up by the child, and slowly he starts talking, learning, explaining in mother tongue. Therefore, mother tongue, that mother language came first, and thereafter the culture.
Very nice. Wow, that was a discussion I was going to come to, but looks like you answered it right now. That language is very important. So I want to go to thank you, Ashok Uncle Ji. Manik, the next question is for you, but I wanted to quickly mention what Nelson Mandela said. Like, if you talk to a man in a language he understands, that goes to his head, then goes to his head, right? But if you talk to him in his language, that goes straight to his head, right? With that, I want to ask, like, especially where we were growing and back in India, and Senator, you might be able to relate to this as well. Don't most parents want their children to speak in English? Like, that was like a prestige and pride. So what was that about? Did that prevent us from learning our own mother tongue initially? Because everybody would be like looking for convents to put their children in. Can you speak about that a little bit? You're on mute, Manik.
Yes, I'm back. Sorry. Thank you. That's a very good segue into an angle where we see politics playing a big role in cultures, civilizations, and languages. Uh, for example, Alexander goes into Egypt, and Greek goes along with him. Um, uh, all along history, we've seen the conquerors imposing their faiths, their languages, their culture, and so on. So, contextually, historically, what happened was for about 200 years, the British were in India, and they were the last of the people before the Indian states, the various kingdoms came together to say, you know what, we want to be on our own. So they had a major impact on India, of course, financial, economically too. When they came, I think, we were having 27% of the GDP of the world. By the time they left, we were down to 3% GDP of the world. So a huge effect had been created, and with it, Anglicization also had been happening, and colonization. And as a colony, we were not really quite a colony because we really could not be colonized. They did not come and live and colonize the landmass. They only administered. And so when they administered, certain things came from outside of the country. For example, late 18th centuries when we had the chickenpox, smallpox vaccine invented in Britain. And 4 years later, it had already come into India. It came into India because the British soldiers needed the vaccine. And from there, from 1802, India has not turned back on the vaccination program. We have, I think, 27 vaccines. We are able to do a mass vaccination program and all of that. So all of this gave context to the people in the local landmass to want to learn um, English because English was bringing in technology and science. The local languages, in fact, today there are 22 scheduled languages. There are no national language in India. There are only two official languages, but 22 scheduled languages. And so every one of those states with their own languages chose a path to go towards the future. And the part of the country that I come from, Tamil Nadu, our politicians chose what we call a two-language formula. One is Tamil, which basically allows the citizen to learn from their mother tongue. But then we did not quite have the scientific grammar, the scientific lexicon, the vocabulary to be able to progress into science. So our politicians said we need English so that we can communicate to the world. So So in our lifetime, between you and I think it was not just fashionable, but it was necessary for our parents to push us towards learning English and getting to do something more. And that's what's happened. Most of us, a lot of us, have immigrated from outside of the country, and we have gone back to our state, our primary. In fact, I probably think in English more than in my mother tongue. I have to translate it because right from a young age, we went to a school where they taught us English. And from there on, my higher studies was in English. And then from there on, I came to America. And here I am thinking in English.
Awesome, great. Thank you, Manik. I have a follow-up question for you. But before I go to Ashok Uncle for the next question, Inam, thank you so much for joining us. He wears several hats, and I'm coming to you for questions right after. Inamji is Inamullah is also an artist, an entrepreneur, and oh my gosh, his art with language is also like I've watched his entire show. I know I couldn't attend in person, but I made sure I watched it entirely on YouTube. So I know you'd be happy about that. It was an awesome show that you displayed, the skit. So thank you for joining us. And when I do ask you to speak, please introduce yourself further as well. But Manik, my follow-up question for you was: Did the colonization, which was the British, for specific to India, were they very specific that they wanted us to get rid of our native language? So we could all pick up English. So we would ultimately, it would serve for them better. So we would be producing more for them rather than doing our own business in our own native language. Do you think that ever happened?
That's a very intriguing question. Prior to the British coming in, and even during the British times, there were only two languages that were predominantly supported. One was Sanskrit, and the other was Urdu, Urdu. So, and both these were religious oriented. They were not scientifically oriented. If you went to an Urdu madrasa, you learned about the Islamic religion. If you went to a Sanskrit school, you learned about the Vedas. And none of these really brought in any other ability into the country. So as the British were administering, they should have realized that they needed some kind of language to be imparted, or some kind of knowledge to be imparted to the breadth and width of the country so that they can administer better. So there definitely was that. But also what it had was a positive consequences. The positive consequences was up until then, only certain people could go to a madrasa or a Sanskrit college or Sanskrit school. But when the British opened up in 1835, 1836, Macaulay actually, he opened education up to the masses. So we saw people that could not potentially go to any school or have any education under the four Varna system, all of a sudden we open up. And when they opened up, it brought up the entire consciousness of the country to a different level. And finally, that's what drove them away anyway.
That follow-up question I have for Ashok Uncle Ji is tell us, so because Manik brought about the different languages in India, tell us, and also he said there's no national language. So can you tell us a little bit more about that, Ashok Uncle? Like, why is there no national language in India?
At the outset, I will tell you, a person is known by the company he keeps. Likewise, a person is known by the language he speaks. The linguistic is a science of languages that is good enough for academic discipline. So in India, there were more than 29 states. So there are more than 29 different languages. So each language, for example, in Gujarati, then in Maharashtra, Marathi, and then in Punjabi language. So there was a linguistic distribution of the states. That was a great mistake. That linguistic separations of different states has still created some problems, some damage to the mainstream. Of course, on paper they say Hindi is the Rashtra Bhasha, the national language, but it is not put into force. Even the British time colonial system was continued. So the historiography and the governance of school system, education, general administration, and all such corporations in big cities like Mumbai, Ahmedabad, Calcutta, Delhi, or Chennai, that is Madras, was still going on in the old language, that is language of the state. And therefore, people have not developed national spirit, which is otherwise required. Now we know that here in USA, English is for academic discipline. There is uniformity of language from north to south and from east to west. But that is not the case with India. Suppose if I am to tell you in Sanskrit what we have studied till my 15 to 16 years of age, that we used to give more importance to mother because the topic is mother and the mother tongue. Now, I was taught in Sanskrit, Ya Devi Sarva Bhuteshu, Buddhi Shakti Lakshmi Rupena Samsita, Namastasmai, 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 Namo Namaha. That is to say in Gujarati, Hey Matru Shakti Devi, mother. Mother is very powerful. Powerful in the sense of buddhi, that is intelligence. Powerful in the sense of strength, willpower. And then mother, a source of Lakshmi, that is finance and money matters. Therefore, every child, mother does all these things to give the child Lakshmi, then Shakti, and then Buddhi, that is intelligence. So in our days we were taught that goddess Saraswati has got the ability to teach. So Saraswati becomes the education minister.
Right.
So far as the Shakti is concerned, that is strength, power, or willpower, we consider goddess Durga. I hope you all will remember, or you might have witnessed, that during Navratri, it is called the Durga Puja. For 9 days, we enjoy the festival. I think some of the panel members must have witnessed these Navratri functions. Even I will tell you, there are about more than 1200 temples considered by Swaminarayan Sampradaya. That Pramukh Swami, who did all wonderful job, and he wanted to bring some Hinduism here in America. And I am happy that because of the liberalization by American administration, as such, the documentation of language, the culture, the custom, the civilization of Hinduism has to some extent allowed here in America. It's a great thing.
Awesome.
Definitely, it's a great thing.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Ashok Uncle. Just the importance of how comes with language and culture and the belief system as well, which is open much in America. So I want to go to Inam ji next. And then I want to come back to Senator Michelle right after that. So we've been talking about the importance of language, but I want to talk to you about the importance of language and culture. We'll be deep diving into culture a little later, but tell us how important language is. Language is to keep the cultural heritage alive. Inamji, please. You're on mute. Can you unmute?
Is it okay now?
Yes, we can hear you.
My apologies. I remember from your email that the topic was which came first, the language or the culture. So I came with that mindset.
Yes, please answer. Yes.
I'm glad that we are having a broad discussion here. The way I see it, the language is the air we breathe, literally, and the civilization is the clothes and the perfume that we wear on. And if I have to create an analogy, we just cannot. I will say that a body is the culture and the brain is the language. So we cannot separate them. They are together. And if there's a body without the brain, there is no body. So language plays a significant role in establishing any culture. And and nobody has created any civilization without the use of any language. So if you read the history, you will realize that the basis of any civilization in the last 2, 3, 4,000 years of history, or even more, you will see that language is the main reason because of which a specific culture was born. So they are intertwined. You cannot separate them. Uh, no culture was created without a language. That's how I see it. And if you need to kill a civilization, kill the language, as one gentleman said earlier, uh, that's uh, that's how you do it. And it's funny that Uncle mentioned one thing that reminded me of a book that I was reading yesterday about American history. That when the Europeans were penetrating into the American land, uh, the one of the most famous general statements were that kill the Indian, but not the man. So they wanted to kill the civilization, but keep the human being alive, because that can be part of the Western civilization that was moving into this area.
Okay. And Inam, if you can quickly introduce further yourself, I just introduced as an artist and an entrepreneur, and what are the other languages you speak?
I speak English and Urdu primarily. I know a little bit of Sanskrit. I know a little bit of Persian. I know a little bit of Arabic. But my primary languages are, of course, Urdu and English. I was raised speaking Urdu language, which is basically comprised of multiple language. Urdu itself is, if you ask me, it's not a language of it's a collection of multiple languages, primarily Sanskrit, Turkish, Persian, Punjabi, Sindhi, and so that has been my mother tongue.
Okay, very nice, thank you. And Senator, for you, Michelle, is when you speak your native language, which is your mother tongue, there's an elicit of like this strong family bond, this pride, this honor, this class. Like I'm proud when I say I'm Tamil, right? Like I don't know where that comes from. It's from innate. I don't know where it's in my blood. Like I'll not put that down anywhere. Like so, I don't want to come out as like the wrong sort of a pride. But I am proud, just like how you are a Chinese proud American. I am a proud Indian and a Tamil American as well. So, but tell me how important it is. For example, your kids, the strong family bond. How important is language to go back to our ancestors or our grandparents and be able to make that connection? Is it important for strong family bonds?
I think the language component is very important for strong family bonds, and I say that because I'm a second generation Chinese American. My parents came here primarily, but my grandparents also came here. So as you go back in the family tree, that tie to the language is more and more important in terms of how you communicate with your ancestors and with your family. For example, when my grandparents were both still alive, I couldn't speak English to them, right? Because they really didn't speak English very well. Like they had very rudimentary English, but I really had to rely on my Cantonese skills in order to talk with them at all, right? And so that tie was extremely important. With my parents, now, and I think you've probably seen this in your own families and in your own culture, as you spend more time in America and as your kids grow up here, we start to blend our native language is a little bit more with English. So I would say that when I was home, especially by the time I got to high school and college, that we were really speaking half and half English and Chinese at home, because that's just the nature of it, right? All of me and my sisters spoke English outside of the home, and we would bring it home as well. So we kind of got this blended, Chinglish as we call it, at home.
I think we have that in our English. What is that? Something like that was, yeah,
Spanglish,
English, Spanglish, yeah.
And we see that, right, in immigrant families where the children are second generation. It's like, how do we blend these things together? And it is kind of beautiful and evocative to think about that language is an exemplar, like an example of how these cultures blend in a very, tangible way. But the less, now that I'm older, I don't live with my parents anymore. My kids don't speak Chinese. And I find it's harder for me to go back when I go home to speak Chinese as fluidly as I used to and as I would like, because I really don't speak it every day. The only time I really do speak it is if I'm on the phone with my parents or when I go visit them. And I do feel that that's a loss. And I noticed that when my grandparents were still alive, and as I was an adult, that it became harder for me to talk to them because I was losing my language skills. So I think that that language as a tie to your heritage is really important, not just in terms of the actual language itself, harkening back to the country of origin, but in terms of connecting with people.
Sure. So, do you is there some form of guilt that the Chinese language is sort of ending with your generation and it is not, or do you think your kids will get interested at some point to actually learn Chinese during their college?
I think that's possible. And I will tell you that when I went to college, I grew up just speaking Chinese, but I didn't grow up learning how to write Chinese, right? A lot of Chinese Americans, their parents would send them to Chinese school on the weekend. I think we've all heard these stories. All my friends were like, oh, I can't go out and hang out on Saturday because I have Chinese school. My parents chose to not do that for me because I was doing other things. And that was fine. I was actually very happy to not have to spend my whole Saturday every single day of my life in Chinese school. But when I went to college, I thought, maybe this is something I want to learn. So I did take a Chinese class in college specifically to learn how to write, to learn how to speak Mandarin. But it was much harder. I will tell you that if you do not practice that every single day, you lose it. And that's exactly what happened to me. I took Chinese for 2 years, and then I went on because I was pre-med and I was like taking other classes. So I was like, it's fine. I lost it all instantly, right? I really can't speak Mandarin that well at all. And I think if my kids are interested in doing it, that I would be happy to have them learn Chinese, but I don't think it's going to be as easy for them to pick it up, especially when you're 18, 19, 20 years old to pick it up for the first time. And that's a loss. I do feel guilty about that.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Senator. We have something we have to discuss about later as well. How do we remove that guilt, or anyway, that's a different topic totally. But Salilji, I want to talk to you about this professor Jim Cunnings from University of Toronto in Canada. Has done several research and sort of has concluded or provided literature that person who is multilingual has more advanced critical thinking, right? As they know and have explored how to use the language of choice at the moment in time. So, does that mean those who don't speak mother tongue or multiple languages except English or just one language, they're not advanced? They're not advanced critically thinking.
It's a very interesting question. The reason I say this, because if you look at it, my kids, they don't speak any other language than English because they grew up here and that's all they learned. At home, me and my wife, we also spoke English because she's Kannada and I'm Marathi. So we couldn't, fully communicate. So we just chose the easy path. And yes, it becomes difficult for the kids to understand and learn. And with language, what happens is, unless you have spoken the language for 20 plus years, you start losing it a little bit. But there is a solution. And I think you must have already heard about the application called Babel. And I learned about it the hard way. I was on a tour and we had a lot of Chinese folks over there in there. And my neighbor sitting next to me was Chinese. And he started speaking and I couldn't understand. So he just said, wait a second. And he pulled his cell phone and put Babel and he spoke in Chinese. And then he pressed a button and I could hear in English. And then he said, you speak. So I replied in English. And so people still communicate. Now, of course, will that affect the culture? Yes, absolutely. I think culture is always changing. I feel culture is always dynamic because it's too many things that impact the culture. So we may have a culture right now and that changes and that evolves and so on and so forth. So that's just my thought. So yes, it will be difficult to remember the languages, but in case somebody does know language and cannot speak one common language, they can still communicate.
Very well said. I'm going to go for next question to Manik, but also wanted to quickly touch base about now knowing a native language has commercial advantages. Is it professionally and commercially are we benefited by knowing our native language, Salilji?
Oh, you're asking me?
Yes.
Sorry. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, what happens is, I have noticed, being in when I was born and brought up in Bombay, I would speak with different friends in different languages, and you immediately build a bond, and that is really very useful and helpful to both, and you can communicate very openly and freely. So I do think that it does impact.
Okay, sounds good. So far we heard, for the listeners. So far we heard all the benefits and advantages of speaking the native language, from culture bond, from a strong family bond, and also beneficial to commercial uses as well. But I want to also discuss now, Manik, about challenges of what are the challenges of learning mother tongue. We discussed that to an extent, but I hear migration, I hear globalization, and Salil talked about technology, right? If you can quickly talk about the challenges of mother tongue learning, that means we also have to discuss the shrinkage in usage of a specific language, right? And if I give you the statistics, you're going to be like, we're all going to be odd, but I want to hear from you and then give the statistics of how many languages are dying per day. Can you unmute, please?
Yes, thank you. Yes, the native language or mother tongue is very, very important, as all of us know, because we tend to think in those lines, and our creative best and our innovation stem from there. All else, technology, everything else, like Salil said, you could have a translator that can. I can talk to Michelle in Cantonese, Mandarin, if she so chooses to. So, but that was not the case earlier. So earlier, in even prior to about 100 years ago, the world was struggling to get a purity of thought through their language. Everyone was trying to preserve their language. We still aim to preserve our language because that is the best medium for anyone to express. So if I were living in my native land, then my native or mother tongue is most important to me because that is the most spoken language. That is where we communicate with each other, and that is where the markets are. So my market is those who speak my language. So I do need to learn that. And for people like us who have immigrated out, we have lost the ability to keep up with the language. The language evolves. Language evolves, cultures evolve, and they just go hand in hand, as Inam said. It is in sync with each other. If that be the case, if people have gone away from their native land, then they are on a different timeline altogether. So when they go back, they are probably catching up from 10, 20 years back or whenever they left. So the challenges of learning a native tongue is the ability to be able to use it, of course, and the mindset that says, I want to go back to my native tongue. And that's a conscious decision. As the senator said, my sons are probably like her. I did not force them to speak Tamil at home, so they did not quite get Tamil. But now my oldest son is going and trying to learn, and he's finding it very difficult because he's lost it. But he's got the spirit, and I'm sure he'll get there. So I think the most important thing is the spirit of wanting to learn without minimizing any other language. Our language is our greatest, not necessarily the greatest in the world. It is our greatest. It's the best for us. So it's got to be personal.
Great, sounds good. So I just quickly give you some statistics from what I've been reading. Almost 7,000 plus languages across the world. 61% of those languages have that were spoken at first in 1795 are doomed or extinct. They don't exist. 61% of those languages from 17th century, right? Several factors for that. Governments and people around the world have increasingly become aware of the language loss crisis. So we are creating that awareness to keep our mother tongue going. And right now, 9 languages a year or even one every 40 seconds cease to be spoken. So by 2080, the rate will rise to 16 languages per year will be lost. Yeah. So that sort of gives us a little bit of bad feeling that we are also losing the culture along with that language. But Michelle, I know you have to leave in a few minutes. If you want to, and then I want to go to Inamji and then Ashok Uncle for questions. But Michelle, if you want to give us some closing thoughts so that you can leave and you have to.
Yeah, and again, thank you again for having this conversation. I find it especially really interesting, this idea of language loss and losing the culture, because we think about it in terms of almost like extinction, right? Like once you lose a spoken language and it's no longer, alive, as we call it, just like Latin is no longer a live language, right? It's a dead language. It's really impossible to revive it in the way that when you lose a species, you can't bring it back, right? Because once a language is no longer natively spoken, all the pronunciation, the jargon, and the lingo, and all these things are impossible to recreate. So I think it's really important to focus on these types of things, especially as the world becomes increasingly globalized and homogenized. The importance of putting in the effort to maintain these cultural differences. Same as in India. There's so many Chinese dialects, and we take such pride in saying, not saying I speak Chinese, but I say I speak Cantonese, right? Because these differences are important and it makes a difference to our families, the nuances of what we bring to the table and what it means for us and our growing up in our families. So I really appreciate everyone here for being so thoughtful in how we're approaching this issue and the importance of investing for not just us and our families, but our kids and our kids' kids moving forward.
Thank you so much, Senator, for your time, and we wish you all the best. And thank you for taking time off during the Sunday morning to join us. Yeah, thank you. So, Inam, my question is for you now that, and I will go to Monica at some point to ask about how do we revive, how does this excavation help bring civilizations back and to learn more from the past. But my question now for you is how do we improve the mother tongue learning, right? After coming here, just like Michelle mentioned, the problem that she was having was like the kids had other priorities. They didn't want to go every Saturday to go into a Chinese school to learn Chinese and spend that day. So we are respecting them as kids, as individuals, but there must be ways to improve mother tongue learning even here so that it is not lost. How do families, how do communities, how do societies do that?
I'm really happy that you posed this question because this is where we need to probably focus on more so than anything else, time wise. And you're right. There was a United Nations report maybe a couple of months ago that out of 7,000 languages, 3,500 have completely disappeared, and about 1,500 additional will disappear in the next 30 years. Uh, and I think the world is going towards unification of language and unification of culture as a result also. I was in China last year, uh, and I saw more. I was in China around the Christmas time frame last year, and the whole country was celebrating Christmas, not as a religious holiday, but as a Western holiday. So this unification of culture, the unification of language is happening extremely fast all throughout the world. And I believe that understanding your roots is a major part of who you are, and we are losing that. So as a result of that, we should all perhaps you should have another session, Dr. Nasir Dawood, just focused on brainstorming the ideas as to how we can make a difference in terms of bringing our own roots back to into our children, and have our children participate in that discussion also, not only old people like me into this discussion. You mentioned about the play that I just wrote and we performed in end of October, called Half Plate in Atlanta. So it's if anybody who understands Hindi language will be able to understand it completely. Also, it's primarily written in Urdu, but it's written in traditional Urdu, which is closer to Hindi language. It is available on YouTube, Half Plate in Atlanta. If you like to go and watch it, it ends with the same concept that how can we introduce our roots and our language into our children basically. And like Manik, I have also three sons, and I made the same mistake that in the beginning, when they were 2, 3, 4 years old, we used to spend the time to speak Urdu language with them. But when they used to reply back to us in English when they started going to school, we changed, and we basically are 100% English now with them. They learn few words here and there. But what I noticed has helped is if they travel back to their regions of origin, whether it's Pakistan, India, Bangladesh, or whatever part of the world, and they even spend a month a year with their grandparents, their uncles, aunts, and neighbors, that used to give them a sort of like a booster charge, to pick up the language extremely fast, especially when they're in young at age, when they are in 10, 15, 13, 12 years old of age. So I think if we all make an effort to make sure that they are physically connected to the land where that language, that culture is practiced, that's one tool that I have experienced has become very helpful. But we also need to, Michelle mentioned that, Saturday school, Sunday school, and no kid takes interest in something like that. But I've seen people or kids taking interest back again when they come into their 20s. They absolutely hate it when they're teenagers, and they don't want to get involved. They don't want to spend it. And that's my experience, by the way. But I've seen my kids now are in 20s or early 30s, that they have started taking some interest back. So this is the right time to attack, I think, in my opinion, where you can bring in. So the second play that I'm finishing up right now has 50% youngsters and 50% people of our age in that play. It is half in Hindi, Urdu, and half in English language. And the subject is exactly what you're talking about. And it's our good luck that uh, I'm working with Sandhya ji on this project with Dhoop Chow, so that we can co-produce this. And Alliance Theatre has actually accepted to run this play, which is a Tony Award-winning uh, theater, one of the best in the nation, and it has a capacity of 1,150 people. So we plan to finish it up in the next 12 months and produce it. So if I feel that if we involve the kids in projects together with us that involves language, and let them speak English, but at the same time bring them back to our cultural heritage, the roots. Uh, so the kids are taking more interest in that play that I have seen in anything else in the past. That, oh really, you want to do that? I want to be part of it. I want to be part of it. So so we need to come up with these tools. If we come up with online programs or weekend language sessions, nobody's going to take interest. I think kids need actual physical performances in which they can learn and be part of the program, and let them allow to do what they want to do on the English side and the American side. But there has to be a mingling of the two cultures to be able to bring them back.
Very well, Sarinam. What I'm hearing from you is the way to preserve the language is, of course, then preserving the culture is through involvement, direct engagement with the with the youth
Exactly.
and the
Exactly.
adult population, and also taking them back to the roots to spend some time back there to communicate with other family members. And of course, I can see other things are such as producing some of what you just did. You produced a play. So producing such materials in that language that we want them to pick up, and supporting some of those teaching methods, which is actually happening in weekend classes or schools. So great ways to preserve a language. Thank you. And so Ashok Uncle Ji, the next question is for you. Okay. So when I for the initial part of my life, I didn't grow up in India, so I had my mom who never spoke English, only Tamil. She would hit on my head and make me read and write Tamil and speak Tamil. And I did that, and I've not forgotten still, so I can read and write in Tamil. Though I didn't go to school to learn Tamil, Ashok Uncle Ji. But my sisters, on the other hand, they just left it, just like the kids nowadays. So
Mm.
they can't still read and write, though we were raised in the same house. So is language an individual interest? Then when I went to med school, I picked up Kannada, Telugu. That was my interest. I want to learn more language so I can communicate with more population in their own language. Is that individual, or is it we are doing a bad parenting?
It is individual as well as parenting. because the children do not know as to which line of studies is going to be beneficial in future. Because basically, every Indian, as you know, is concerned with roti, kapda, makan. I hope you understand this.
Yes.
So basic needs are to be fulfilled first. So in that case, I consider after migration here in America, what I find that in US, men and women adopt to linguistic variation. I do not say that there is a war, but there is an encroachment of Spanish, French language, etc. on English language. But let me assure you, as I, along with my children, Hina as well as Hemang, now Hemang is 47 while Hina is 44 years of age, a doctor, and he is a computer engineer. Sorry, that I have American English. It's a very dynamic society, is more innovative with all nations contact becomes a general use, and therefore English has become a universal language.
Please drink water, Uncle Ji.
I'm sorry.
No problem. Shall I come back to you? Can I go back, or you're okay? I want to make sure you're good.
So in the beginning, I found some difficulties in interpretation of English language. But since my children have settled down here in USA, one at Greenville, my son, and my daughter Hina here in Atlanta, they both have picked up English. And they talk so fluent English that sometimes I get astonished that if I would have come to USA before 50 years, I would have definitely learned English because it's a lucid language. It's innovative. It is very flexible. It is not fixed. So here, people knowing English, they have broad vision of thinking, broad vision of heart. As earlier one of the speaker told, that the mind and the heart should have symmetricity. If heart goes for something by way of wish or attachment, the mind discard. The mind doesn't want to go that way. So there is conflict. So here also in America, there is some sort of say war in languages. But I am very happy that here languages have been given protection, and all other languages like 15 or 16 languages I have gone through, which is always written in day-to-day administration. That I being a patient, during my medication, I used to receive from insurance that your coverage is approved, and therefore I used to go through that paper, and I found that it is written in 15 languages. It means they are helping me, aiding me, and giving me full information. So that is really an appreciable thing which America has adopted. This is what
Very
I feel. It is
okay.
very useful.
Very well said. So, Ashok Uncle, one more follow-up question. So, is culture? So,
Yes.
culture can be a language, religion, cuisine, and traditions like Eastern culture, Western culture, African culture, right? But is culture or language static or fixed? I think you described English language very well. But is culture static or fixed? So, I think based on that, languages also differ.
No, culture is flexible. Now, the very word culture represents attitude. It also represents behavior and character. If suppose we do not have character, if we do not have proper attitude and proper behavior, then definitely we'll be sidelined. So culture has got direct relation with the language. If I am sincere, dedicated, and very faithful to my parents and to my country and to my motherland, at the same time, I'll be very much faithful to America. I am faithful to my family. I hope you know that we three generations live together. While here in US, a boy gets married then he gets separated with his wife and kids. But myself, with my grandson who is 18 years of age in college, and my daughter's two kids, two daughters going to school, but they all come and enjoy my company. They say, Dadaji, how are you? Then we sit together, enjoy the food at night. Likewise, we also on Saturday, Sunday enjoy our breakfast together. So that is a bondage, parental bondage, feelings of brotherhood, feelings of parenthood. So I hope culture is very important and which is to be preserved.
Very well said. Thank you so much. With that, I want to go to Manik for the next question. So obviously, culture and language are very much related, and you talked about civilization. What are some of the ways that government across the world, or even where we are from, is preserving and identifying the roots, the civilization? Because that sort of brings us more. The more we are understanding of our roots, this is how the ancestors came in, this is what they spoke, this is how it was, gives us a more of a relatability. We are able to relate, otherwise it becomes unrelatable. Can you talk about some of those excavation efforts that you're involved in, please? And why are excavations done?
Sure. Yes, world over, we see migrations, we see influences from a different civilization and all of that. So, along the various sciences, anthropology is one that has started, that was started to be able to understand how man came about, or what were his precedents, where he's going, and all of that. Along with that, there also came another science called archaeology. So, archaeology is the science of literally finding artifacts from the past and fitting it to understand what could have happened and establish a certain truth. For example, we have the Indus Valley civilization, Mohenjo-daro, that we found in the northwestern part of India. We clearly are able to establish that that particular civilization is probably anywhere between 4,500 to about 3,700 BC, uh, from now, 4,500 years ago to 3,700 years ago. So we saw a thriving habitat, and then with complete scripts and a lot of sophisticated civilized angles. So it opened up a complete understanding of the people that must have lived at that point of time in that area. And of course, carbon dating is allowing us to date exactly when it could have happened. And so, coming from South India, a place rich with heritage that are still living, for example, there are 38,000 temples in South India, in Tamil Nadu alone. And in fact, the last 10 years, I've had the best time of my life going and visiting temples. And I had very simple criteria. No temple should be younger than 700 years old for me. No temple should be, the temple that I go to should not be crowded. And if I can climb over compound walls and bushes, the better. So I've had a great time enjoying the temples in the raw and finding them. And of course, all of them have been documented by the Archaeological Survey of India. And and from then, when the British actually started that in the late early 19th century, uh, the heritage of the country is now being revealed slowly and steadily, and we are able to in South India and Tamil Nadu alone, we've excavated 40 sites, and about probably 35 of them have been published with results. And that's how we came across in my lifetime here in the last 10 years a place called Kiradi. So we all know that civilizations happen along riverways because that's where people congregate. And there is a river called Vaigai. And scholars and archaeologists were able to get into identifying 21 potential areas that they could go to. Mind you, right now they've been built over. There are houses and all of that. So you really cannot raise the ground and go in. But then they were able to find out that the river had actually changed course, and there was an older course where you could go and take. And sure enough, a place called Kirari, we were able to get to, I think, 6, 7 meters, and every meter goes more ancient than the one above because the layers just keep piling on. So at this point, we have been able to carbon date up to 2,600 years ago. That is the hardest evidence we have in India, because mostly in India, our history has been constructed based on the literature that we have, whether it's a Vedic literature or a Sangam literature. We took it from there and we said, oh, there is a explanation of a type of land. So that kind of land must have existed. For example, Kurinji means hilly region. So Tamil Nadu has 5 types of land, Aindinai we call it. And so each one has got its own culture. So when we now go, and I've been to some mountainous areas where we have found, again, not documented, cave paintings. I mean, paintings that we now know could be dated very easily 4,500 years ago. Of course, we don't have enough funds in India to be able to document all of this. So excavations, wherever they happen, are very, very important. Every relic we get out of that is very, very important. It talks to us as to what we have done in the past. So Tamil Nadu, we have seen that I think we can go up to probably 800, 900 years before the Common Era, which is about 2,900 years. And as archaeologists will not talk about, oh, we are 10,000 years old, their language is 10,000 years old, the culture is 10,000 years old. It might well be, but we have concrete proof of it only up to about 2,900 years ago. But the good thing about what we've done in the excavations is establish a longevity. So the Tamil culture, the Tamil civilization, the Tamil language has been in continuous use for at least 2,900 years. The same kind of habits we have. For example, I'll just give one small example. Of course, I can show pictures later, but there's a wealth of information we get from pot sherds. Pots were made by human beings very early in our civilizations, anywhere in the world, and they get buried. And when we excavate and find those pots, we try to figure out what technology they used or what scribbles they've done. So they might be a graffiti, or they might actually be an actual script. So in Kiradi, we found a potsherd with very simple word, a name, Adan. Right? Adan means a name of a person. Now, what that indicates is, number one, that thing was scratched on the pot, not actually baked into it. If it was baked, it could have meant that a chieftain or a king had commissioned the making of the pot. But this one was actually probably sold to someone took it home and he scratched his name. And to this day, in Tamil Nadu, when we go to for weddings, we offer gifts of vessels, and we actually put our initials.
I still have that. Yes.
Yes, we still bring it. So 2,600 years ago, whatever we did in Tamil Nadu is still continuing. So I'm just highlighting that excavations are important for us to see longevity and for us to understand the past. Thank you.
Very well said. So that's one way of learning more and be able to relate to some of the happenings, like behaviors, like Uncle G said, some of the behaviors that we adopt from early beginning. So Salilji, my question is, obviously, I think you mentioned earlier that language came first. And so what does language and culture mean to a global world now that we are more connected, especially in the last 2 years? And my other question for you and Inam also would be, does it even matter what we are talking today? I mean, it looks like majority, not all, of our children didn't pick up our language. And then, of course, the culture might be 50%, but during their marriage and their generation, so does it even matter what we are talking today? Or is it just our own passion that we discussing this today? Salilji, please.
Right. It's a very complicated culture and languages, especially for the younger ones. Because I know even my cousins, their kids in India, they also communicate in English, and it's just kind of getting to that trend. And it's all WhatsApp language and WhatsApp culture, or Facebook language, Facebook culture, and it's kind of a difficult trend on one hand. On the other hand, they are able to communicate across the globe, so that's a positive in that. So culture is, as I mentioned, it's always evolving, and I think it's going to keep evolving. And several centuries later, we won't even recognize that this was a culture or what was a culture. Because these days, if you notice, all these young kids and even the regular one also, I mean, they're just looking down and constantly typing something, using the cell phones and communicating that way. They won't even talk personally, but they would communicate that way. So it's kind of a very evolving situation. And I don't know, I have mixed feelings. I feel, on one hand, I feel it's great that we are able to communicate across the globe with all the folks. On the other hand, you also feel that, okay, the loss of language, because unless and until you have someone to talk to, the languages cannot be widespread. That becomes difficult. Say, for example, my kids, even if they would have known Marathi or Hindi or whatever, I would have taught them, taken the trouble to do that. But who would they talk to? Who would they talk to in that language? Fine, if I connect them with my cousins' kids in India, their generation, whatever, and they may still end up communicating in English. So it's very difficult. I think it's a, on one hand, it's a choice. At the On the other hand, it's also, since you're communicating, it's a, both people have to be on the same page to communicate, you know so that's what my thought is. I'm kind of like 50-50. I'm not really sure. I'm not I mean, I cannot predict the future, so I can't say that. But it's a troubling situation in one, on one hand, and it's also beneficial on the other hand. But
So,
that's those are my thoughts.
so should we continue these discussions or say, well, हाथ धो लिया चलो चलते हैं?
I'm okay with either. This is great discussion.
Oh my
I
gosh,
really
I
appreciate.
thought I thought you would say no, no, we should continue. The next question, the same almost question is for you. How do we, what does this mean to the global world? And also, I would like for you to sort of give us some words and wisdom about, does losing a language means losing music, arts, everything that you represent in Amji?
Yeah, I'm going to answer your second question first. I definitely think losing a language would definitely mean losing art, losing music, losing living style, thinking style, food. When you lose a language, culture, you lose multiple things with it, not only one thing. Uh, and that does bother me, mentally. That I think these differences make us unique, make us interesting, make us uh, uh, attractive to other cultures, and we become attracted to other cultures too. And a good way of identifying each other. Uh, but we are definitely facing a force which is much greater than what our resources are to compete with, as Salil Bhai said, that unification is happening faster than we expected. Nobody expected 20 years ago. My background is wireless communication, and myself never expected 25 years ago what we are experiencing today with iPhones and Samsungs and all that. So this is happening much faster. I also believe that the world may actually end up evolving into a new form of language. It may not be English, actually. It may be some kind of a AI-based machine language, which is not that far, which will be automatically translated into any basic form of language that you do understand, as Mr. Salil mentioned his experience in the airplane with the Chinese person. That's a stepping stone. That's a very primitive form of what is about to happen in the next few years. That we might be wearing something in our ears, or on our wrist, which will automatically translate 100 languages into the language of our choice, and our return will go back to them in the same way. So the language, the superiority of English for the time being may not actually exist the way we see today, and the machine language will probably take over. Um, and I personally think that creates an opportunity. Okay, and I'm hopeful, I'm an optimistic person, that creates an opportunity to maintain and preserve our original cultures and languages, because a medium will exist that will be the huge translator of languages and cultures that will transmit messages from one to another, by each maintaining our own identity at the same time. I think the world is heading in that direction. I think 50 to 70 years ago, we will probably start experiencing that. Um, I was thinking of donating a car that I really love, that I bought, or actually my sons bought for me, to my granddaughter when she grows up. Then I realized that there is no way that she will be able to drive the car that we are driving today. The car
It'll
will
all be electric by then.
it
Yes.
not only elected, the car will drive her. She will not have to drive the car. So I think it's changing extremely fast. So and I think we need to spend time in your next session. By the way, compliments to you, Dr. Nazeera Dawood, for having such wonderful programs, and please continue to do so. It's a major contribution to us. Is to have a, this brainstorming session is where, and bring new the youngsters into it, is to how we can think of ideas to maintain our own identities, our roots, our culture, languages, at the same time living in this ever expanding and extremely fast expanding uh, changes that we are experiencing in the world today.
Wow, very, very intensely said words about the future, Inamji. I do want us to end the session in a few minutes, in probably 5 minutes or so. But Inamji, one question I have is like how my mom forced me to sit and learn the language, to learn and write, so I could communicate with my grandpa, which actually happened because when I was in med school, I was able to write letters back and forth to my grandpa, which he also wrote back. I didn't have to travel the whole night to come and be with him to convey messages. But is that possible in nowadays?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So,
Uh,
Ashok Uncle Ji is going to say we are bad parents.
it's not going to be possible, but creative methods, new creative methods are needed, that we need to think and develop of new ways to bring this new generation into it. I was part of a, I'm going to share quickly, I know we have to go, a celebration at a Jewish friend of mine, uh, third generation European family, as American as you can be. But it was a religious celebration, and for my surprise, for my absolute surprise, there were three generations present. All sang songs in Hebrew, and they all knew the meanings of it. They all transmitted the information, and through dresses, through food, through different. So there are ways that if you involve, the generations into certain interesting projects together, versus having to hit on their head. I think there are possibilities that we can do it. And if we can preserve for 50 or 100 years, then we did our part, and let the next generation worry about their part.
Great, great. So I want to go to Ashok Uncle Ji just exactly with what you said. So I think Ashok Uncle Ji, coming back to what you said initially, even your in three generations, you, your sons, and your granddaughters and grandson.
Yes.
So you talked about closely knit society, community, and transferring the knowledge and wisdom. The kids like to be with you, listen to you. So it seems like it is important to an extent to continue and preserve the culture and language.
I absolutely think so.
Yes,
Yes,
I
good.
do agree.
Okay. So, do you want to add anything else to that, Ashok Uncle? How else? What are the some of the pointers you have for families here?
In one way, since after the death of my mother, my auntie took me to Mumbai, where the family, we were 25, 30 people together. So I came to know Tunde Tunde Matir Benna. every mind and every tongue has a different opinion. That is difference in talk, difference in thinking, and difference in behavior. Even then, there was family attachment. For certain reasons, whenever a family function is being held, we all unite together. And I remember there were 5 generations together in my auntie's family. The eldest one, 95 years of age, while the youngest one, 5 years of age. So these 4 or 5 generations we have, that is called our sanskar. And I remember what I have heard, that Sanskrit language is the mother of all other world's languages. In Tamil Nadu, there are certain people who talk in English, talk in Tamil, at the same time they talk in 17 languages. One of the prime minister, so fluent in linguistic, we always try to understand each other by keeping our compass of thinking very, very broad. If a person becomes selfish, then he will develop negative energy. If the man is optimistic, very hopeful, and thinking about future, he will try to gather more light by removing the darkness. For example, the Navratri festival, you must be knowing, when it is done somewhere, performed somewhere in October, November, every year in America. That is the case with India also. Now that Navratri indicates about, for 9 days, prayer of Adya Shakti, that is called Goddess Devi Durga. Now Durga is considered to be the defense minister. Whenever there is negative urja, negative people, or say some sort of scoundrel elements in a human being, then the Durga will come forward and kill and remove it. It means when Ram conquered Ravana and came back to Ayodhya, along with Sitaji and Hanumanji, I think you must be knowing the story. It's a mythology, but it's a true history, where it was said that entire people of the North India, they enjoyed, and they say it's a Dashera. So after 9 days, the 10th day is considered to be a very entertaining festival, where in Navratri, all generations, old and young, boys and girls, mother and daughter, they dance together, they play garbaras. So all this called nothing but culture and civilization. And that we have maintained here, and it is going on since last more than 4,000 years, let me assure you. Because I have gone back, that it was also during the period of Mahabharat. You must have heard the story of Mahabharat. At
Yes.
that time, the Indian border was up to Afghanistan, and that king of Afghanistan daughter came to India after marriage, and that is the story of Kauravas and Pandavas. So anyway, what I wanted to emphasize, that India has got at least 8 to 10,000 years civilization. There is no change, but because of the encroachment and because of the Mughal rule for 500 years, and thereafter British rule for 200 years, and that impression, that colonization is still prevailing in some corners of the states. But the time will come now, since people have a lot of migration here and there from one country to another, and then they switch over from one language to another language. It means there is a universal unity. So even having a lot of languages, say 33 languages in India, written and spoken, but there is one language that is called Hindi. It is called national language. It is something like a bondage. So if we speak in Hindi, then person talking or listening Hindi will definitely become a friend. Now, for example, Bollywood, Hollywood, you must have seen all those pictures which are in Hindi are dubbed in different languages. Or any film produced in Tamil Nadu, is dubbed in English, is dubbed in Hindi, or any other language. So this digitization, internet use, and this
Yes.
modern development has definitely helped us to grow in a better way, mentally, physically, and socially.
Definitely. So I would like to come to the closing comments from each one of you. I'd like to start with Manik, and basically, I would like for you to also address how, because what is one's language is like their own family, right? So you cannot take my language from me. That's my language. That's the wisdom I've learned. So, but we also learned through our discussions that something cannot be forced on someone. It's even our own children, and we are hearing those stories again and again. So no matter what, it's very hard to force a language on someone. But also, if you can offer your closing comments on how can language be be a unity in diversity, because I can't go speak highly of Tamil in a Telugu community. They're obviously going to get like frustrated, like what, even our language is big deal for us, right? So how do I not say about, though I'm proud of Tamil, but I don't want to put someone else down based on their language. So can you address that and sort of give your closing comments?
Yes. In a world increasingly consumeristic and capitalistic, things have just exploded, right? Poetry has died, literally. Not died, it's dying, which means we are not thinking back in our own mother tongue. If we can think in our own mother tongue, all the culture, the arts, all of that will flourish. And those things need to flourish for humans to have a good balance in life. So it's not just about work, get the latest TV, get the latest WhatsApp app, or none of that. It's all about what do I do in my spare time? How do I spend moments within myself to make it meaningful so that I can pass on peace around me and for myself. So the 10 years that I've been in India, I've been very fortunate. I was able to do something on my own business as well as spend a lot of time on the heritage side. And I've been able to see the variety and the diversity that a country, which is not really a country, India, it's just a grouping of states, because we're all individual, probably about 80 odd individual kingdoms that came together that formed this cohesive thing. So the best way for us to go forward is, as all of us would have heard, unity in diversity. You mentioned that. So diversity is very, very important. And that diversity gives access to markets. I mean, if you look at the latest consumeristic angle, it gives access to markets. If you come to India talking in Hindi, I'm not going to buy a Hindi product, a product that's being sold by someone speaking Hindi, because I cannot understand. But if you talk to me in my language, oh yes, I'd like to buy that. So markets are very important if you want to maintain that, and language is very important towards that. And thereby any imposition should be actually discouraged heavily, because there is no need to impose one commonality. I mean, as Inam said, we are not even going to talk languages. We are probably going to talk some machine language, some abstract concept that are going to come in images. And that's what's happening. If you go to our hospitals, someone from Kerala can understand exactly where he needs to go. He understands which is a consulting room. He understands which is a restroom. Everything is so visual. So we are getting into blending together. And for this blending together, we need to appreciate each other's language, culture, and the thought process that go with it. So one of the things I would offer to all of our panelists and everyone who's listening, please come to Tamil Nadu. And I have seen where I've carved actually 3-day, 5-day tours for people with specific themes. There are so many themes. Come to Karnataka. I will send you on a great tour there. Come to Kerala. Come to Andhra Pradesh, Telangana. I have not gone much to the North India, but the South India, it will take 5 lifetimes probably to go through everything. But let's go ahead and exchange our experiences, our moments. let us make it meaningful in each other's territory, giving respect for that territory, giving respect to that indigenous people, and ensuring that we do not impose our ideas because we are their guests.
So, Manik, if there's one word or one sentence that you would like all of us to learn from your language, can you tell us that so we are learning something from you today? I mean, I know what you're going to say, but what about the others? I would like the others to do the same as well. Manik, what is one word or sentence you'd like for us to learn as we leave?
Very good. I have a very simple sentence, the first sentence of a poem by one of our poets from about 2300 years ago. It's called Yadum Ure Yavarum Kele. I'll just explain what it is. Yadum Ure means there are places all over this world. All of those places are mine too. There are people all over the world. Yavarum Kele. There are people all around the world. They are my people too. So even though I might see different color, different shapes, different geographies, all of this entire world belongs to us all. So Yadu Mure Yavaram Kele.
I'm going to ask that from Inam to repeat that later. And similarly, what Inam says, Manik, you have to. Salil ji, so please give your closing comments. From what I heard from Manik is if a community or society is close knit and protecting their culture and language, it can survive for a long time. Or so please give your comments as well.
Very true. Whatever Manik has said, I fully agree with that. One of the things what I would also propose or suggest, and I have been doing that for quite some time.
Are you inviting us to Mumbai?
Sure. Just teaching our kids a certain language or forcing them to learn a certain language, but if they can't communicate with anybody with that, that becomes a issue or a problem. So what I would recommend is, and I have been doing that. So every organization that we have so many organizations here, right? Indian organizations, all kind of things. Why don't we all have like a youth organization for each of those, and at least create a group where they can communicate in different languages? Or we have the training going on for different languages. Why not they have some sort of a group where they start communicating in that, in addition to English, so that is one thing. But at the same time, language is a unifying as well as a dividing force. So we got to be very careful. It's kind of both, and it's very good to learn different languages, but most critical important thing is also to communicate with everybody. So I have mixed feelings. I'm sorry, but that's
okay.
what I.
Can you teach us all something today that we can learn away from, that you want us to take it?
Sure. Learn as many languages as you can. Communicate with as many
No, in
people as you
Marathi, Marathi teaches something in Marathi, just like Manik said.
can.
Maybe a word or a sentence.
Marathi माझी मातृभाषा.
Oh, nice. Marathi Maji Matrubhasha. Marathi is my mother tongue.
Yes, you got it.
Oh, nice. No, I can pick up languages very well, and I like it's my interest.
Yes.
Yeah. So,
But it does get a little difficult after a while because we start thinking in English. After living here for 30, 35 years, 40 years, you start thinking in English, you start everything in English. Now that becomes a little bit. But of course, that's why I used to love to go to India. Whenever I used to go there, I would meet my friends and then speak in different languages. And even here, some, Gujarati friends, Punjabi friends, I would speak a little bit. But eventually it kind of moves back to English,
definitely.
But
Ashok,
thank you. Very, very good topic and really enjoyed everybody's.
we have a follow-up session as Inam suggested. We should. Ashok Uncle Ji, please give your closing comments.
No, we have enjoyed the suggestions given by all the panel members, including yourself.
Thank you.
I am happy that the language has importance because language is from heart and mind together. So whenever there is the proper combination of heart and mind, language is not an issue. The issue is that of unity. And unity means ekatmakta, where we get in sanskar. The sanskar has got Sanskriti, and therefore in Sanskrit language it is said, which I will interpret after in Gujarati, Yatra naryaste pujayante ramante tatra devotaha. In Hindi, what I want to interpret is, जहाँ नारी का मान सम्मान होता है, नारी की रिस्पेक्ट होती है, वहाँ देवों का वास होता है. It means India is giving more importance to Devi, that is goddess, maybe in the form of Saraswati, in the form of Lakshmi, in the form of Durga. At the same time, when Mr. Salil told that I love India, right, everybody loves the mother country, but the question is that of bread and butter. Why we all have come here from our original country or state? We left our original language, but now we discuss and we have met together, and all my panelist members now talk in English.
Yes.
Therefore, there is a reason, since I believe yatra naryaste pujante ramante tatra devta, which is what I have told. Likewise, janani janma bhumischa swargadapi garyashi. Janani means the mother. Janma bhumi means the place of birth, the country where we live. So this Janani and Janmabhumi, the mother and the mother place, the country, mother country, are far, far better even than that of Swarga, that is heaven.
Okay.
This is what we have learned in the Sanatan Dharma.
Okay.
So Sanatan Dharma is complete unification. It doesn't talk about separation.
Got it.
It
So,
doesn't talk about individuality. It
got it.
talks about togetherness, a union for betterment, union for progress, mental, physical, and social.
Very well said. Ashok Uncle what is that you want to teach us in Gujarati language for all of us?
Gujarati મારી માતૃભાષા છે, and I'm proud of Gujarat because you know the great Mahatma Gandhi is from Gujarat.
Yes, very well said. So, Gujarati mano matra bhasha che.
Right.
Oh, nice.
And I will
Okay.
tell you, Gujarat has given some great leaders. Thereafter, Morarji Desai, who was chief minister of undivided Gujarat and Maharashtra before 50 years. And nowadays, Narendra Modi is a Gujarati. Though he insists upon talking in Hindi always, but he at the same time very fluent in English also.
Very well said.
He has
Thank you.
got very broad vision of thinking. Therefore, he is more entertained by all people, even world over, not only in India. So Gujarati people are enterprising people.
Gujarati
make
people
some-
something to be proud of, definitely, Ashok Uncle ji.
Exactly.
You are a proud Gujarati indeed. So thank you for joining us today. And
Thank you.
Inam ji, please, your closing comments.
Well, I totally agree with what Manik said earlier, everything, and I am of the same school of thought, and I do welcome his offer of visiting Tamil Nadu and other parts. My family is actually originally from Andhra Pradesh, and both of my parents were from Hyderabad, and I was born and raised in Karachi. So I would love to. I've been to India 2, 3 times, but I have never had the opportunity to go and explore all these areas that you talked about. I would absolutely love to do that.
And
And
are you are inviting him and us as well back?
that's exactly what my second sentence was, that I would be honored to host you. You mentioned Mohenjo-daro, and there is another older civilization called Gandhara civilization, and I'm sure you know about that. Both are now what we call Pakistan. So I would like to welcome you, and I'll be more than happy to host you and take you to both the locations which are considered to be the oldest civilizations in that part of the world. And India is such a pre-partition India was such a unique region of the world, and I'm using the word region for a reason, is because you mentioned 80 or so kingdoms, but what I was reading the book yesterday, that there were 527 Rajwadas actually. So it was not one country; it was 527 individual owners of that region, and each had some kind of a language or a dialect or a culture to go with that. So such a variety is not non-existing anywhere else in the world. There's so much to learn, and of course we cannot learn everything. But since my heritage is also from the southern part of India. I would love to explore that first. So I would like to definitely accept that, and if life permits, would love to actually come and visit you. And since you are asking for uh, a word or a phrase, I will use the word of Urdu language, only one word, and it's called muhabbat, which is probably understood by all on the screen. I think it is probably more powerful, not only word, the meaning behind that than any other word in the world. We can talk about differences, we can talk about encroachments, we can talk about history, who's right, who is wrong, this and that, and till the cows come home. But if we talk about muhabbat for future, and if we talk about love for future, if we talk about how we can forget the past and learn how to live in harmony, peace, and love in future, I think that's where the key is, and that basically coincides with with what you're talking about, or intend to talk about, is to how to maintain our heritage and unite. I am so proud of this country, as Uncle said. We should all be proud of this country. That my kids' best friends are Hindu Indian boys. I have three boys, and all of three, their best friends are, and that is that this country provides us to be close to each other. Where we come from, they try to separate us. So we need to celebrate that, and I think we need to learn from these kids, actually, more so than we can teach them, and would love to include them in the future.
Awesome. That's a great. So I have to be very thankful for in being amongst all of you thoughtful leaders in this session, and for those listeners who've been listening to us. Thank you so much. We've learned a lot. Definitely, we talked about, should we neglect our mother tongue just in virtue of learning English in English medium or English, or learning other languages or two. We kept hearing that kids, as they grow older, they go back without being forced to pick up on their roots and understand more. There is some sort of bad parenting involved. We learned about that as well when we're not teaching our kids our languages, but we cannot force it upon them. Each panelist have invited each other to host in their own respective country or states, but ultimately I think language is something that we all take pride in, and how do we maintain that culture? So looks like language came first. Is that an agreement? And then culture came, and culture is forever flexible. And of course, United States is something that we are proud of. And we also talked about coming up sessions for a follow-up session, including the youth, on how the roots can be maintained, or culture or the language can be maintained among each other. So thank you to each one of you for joining us this morning on a Sunday morning. And look forward to our February session, which is about diet. Does it actually work? And please join us then. And thank you so much. Follow us on our website, chaiandjustchat.com. Uncle G, special thanks to you for spending your time with us. I still have to talk to you much more for gaining more wisdom. Manik, a very interesting journey of your life of 10 years, visiting all those temples and understanding and being a part of excavation. Salil Ji, as usual, I respect a huge respect for you on all the efforts that you work to the community. And Inamji, though I couldn't attend your session, your play, I watched it from beginning till the end on YouTube, and I'm looking forward to be attending it in person for the second one. So great ways and thoughts about unifying in diversity, but also making sure we show that pride to an extent outside about our languages so others can understand. So Yadamure Yavarum Kelir. Yadamure Yavarum Kelir. Salil ji, Marathi, one final time so everybody gets it. Matrabhasha Marathi che. No.
माझी मातृभाषा मराठी आहे.
माझी मातृभाषा मराठी आहे. Gujarati, unmute please. Gujarati, what did you?
મારી માતૃભાષા ગુજરાતી છે.
મારી માતૃભાષા ગુજરાતી છે. And I want to end with Muhabbat. Thank you so much. All of you, take care. Bye-bye.
Love thy neighbors.
Yes.
Muhabbat means love thy neighbors.
Yes, definitely. Take care, all of you. Yeah.